Welcome to Monday Morning Methane. Today, I'm privileged to be joined by Kevin Byrne, Head of Carbon Research at S&P Global, and Rahul LeBlanc, Vice President Upstream at S&P Global. Gentlemen, S&P has just put out a 2024 benchmark of Permian measurement-informed methane intensity. Kevin, can you tell us a little bit about this research and what you found?
Sure. We found they fell. But I'm sure you want a little bit more than that from me. This is actually the second release, second year in a row we've released our estimated methane intensity of the Permian Basin. And that's thanks to a partnership we have with a company called Inside M, which is an aerospace overflight company. And so this is also the second year we tracked a very significant decline or reduction in overall methane intensity. Last year we saw about a 29% reduction year on year between 2022 and 2023. And this year it's a 22% reduction we've tracked. That's about 50% over the last 2 years, which is incredibly dramatic. And I don't know, I'm looking at Raul on the screen. I think it was surprising to us. And it was also the reductions we saw, because we can see by operator, were across the board. Everybody seemed to be moving in the right direction as well. Yeah, so I'll leave it there, and we can go into more detail on it through anything else you want to ask us.
50% is a massive decline in methane emissions over 2 years. I mean, lots of companies are trying to make these targets over decades, much longer time horizons. So this is really big news. Obviously, there's tons of different estimates out there. There's always skeptics. Government has estimates. Individual companies have estimates. There's lots of academic research. Raul, you crunch the numbers on a lot of this work. Why do you believe this estimate is an accurate gauge of the true emissions?
Sure. It's a great question. So I guess what I would say is this. Actually, if you have five estimates for the Permian, you need to consider the sixth one, which is the true estimate, right? So the deal is nobody knows. And the reason nobody knows is because there are really six things that you want in methane measurement. You want resolution, right? We love the best resolution. Frequency, we'd love it to be as often as possible and continuous if at all feasible. We want coverage. We want to see everywhere. We want threshold. We want to see even the smallest leaks. And we want affordability, right? So it's cheap enough. And then we want reliability. So when we see a number, we know it's the right number. The deal is that no one technology, of course, gives us this. We all know that's not the magic bullet, but we think this is the best estimate because we have a lot of data. This is 700 flights a year, okay, covering 90% of the Permian. We see things all the way down as low as 10 kilograms an hour. We're modeling the rest. Frequency, frankly, I would like to see more frequency, but coverage is good, threshold is good, resolution is good, reliability is good, right? All those things add up to make what we think is the best public estimate out there. Now, I will say this, even if we all agreed on what the actual methane emissions number is, there's ways of expressing it that can make actually get you an order of magnitude difference. What's the scope of that? Is it upstream? Is it midstream? Other facilities included, right? And then how do you calculate things? The numbers we are talking about here today, to be clear, are we often use the percentage of the BOE produced in the basin, okay? And so when we say it fell by 50% over 2 years, it went from 0.93 in 2022 down to about 0.62 in 2023. And then last year clocks in at about 0.44% of BOEs.
And so the reason you're using on a BOE basis is so that you can account for methane abatement across both oil and gas.
That's
Is that
right.
right?
You can put it all on the gas, which is maybe fair, but then all of a sudden your oil, of course, is methane free, right? Which doesn't really make any sense. Okay. So to the degree that methane is produced in order to generate oil and gas volumes, our favorite is using a percentage of BOE produced.
That makes sense. So we do a lot of analysis internally as well, and totally can relate to how you can get order of magnitude discrepancies and estimates depending on what methodology do you use. And so I'm glad
Absolutely.
to hear you're looking very closely at that. When you dig into the data, I'm really curious. Obviously, we have like really, really progressive companies out there who are making very ambitious targets, who are spending millions and millions of dollars to reduce emissions. and then there are laggards. So when you look into the data, do you see that pattern play out as well, or are you seeing pretty consistent emissions reductions across companies?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me share some data with you here. So this is a look at 2024. These are the 65 companies that meet the criteria for having this, which means they have to be big enough, more than 200 barrels a day, and they have to meet other criteria. Basically, it's the 65 largest companies in the basin. And what you see is the flaw of averages, right? It's like just because the average is X doesn't really tell you much, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what you see is I've got companies and the leaders are, often below zero point 0.2. Okay. And the laggards, we had to cut off the axis. Let's put it that way. Okay. So yes, this is very much a story where you have huge differentiation. Okay. Between companies. And you have to think about those things, okay, in order to understand what is going on. Just to show you some other interesting stuff, if I look at a rank improvement chart, now this is from 22 to 23, just because it's a lot clearer. But what you see is some companies actually lose ground, okay, but the majority of companies are decreasing, right? The dot is 22 and the end of the arrow is 23. So you see some big improvements pretty much across the board in those ways. Okay. If I can just take you through a couple of other slides that are interesting. Now I'm going to jump to this and we're going to look at the set of 43 companies that had data for all 3 years, right? So we want to track individual companies. And if I just look at the number of companies that fall into each of these bins, this is pretty interesting, Thomas. So in 2022, we had 12 operators that were less than 0.5%. All right. If I look now, I have, 16 companies that are less than 0.5, but another 8 companies that are less than 0.2 and another 4 that are less than 0.05, categories that didn't even exist a couple of years ago. Okay. What's interesting though is I also have this laggard cohort, okay, of companies down near the bottom that are 1 to 2% in the brown or more than 2. And that's not really changing, right? So you do have companies that are making great progress, and then you have companies that are not making progress at all. Now, what's interesting is this is a look that looks at it just by the number of operators, as if each operator were equal to each other. And as all this data is anonymized by Inside M before it gets to us. But we asked them to give it by production. Okay, so in other words, forget the company count and look here, and the situation is extremely impressive, okay, which shows that the percentage of BOE production that's less than 0.5, okay, has now moved from about 50%, just under 50%, right, to almost more than 90%, right? So the flaw of averages is fully in effect. You have to look under the hood, get into the details in order to find out what's going on.
When you take these three graphs together, it almost seems to me like it suggests that larger companies with more production are making more progress. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we generally would. Although it's interesting, if I took a look at the data we can show privates and publics, there are laggards on the public side. Okay. And there are some real leaders on the private side, right? So it's very difficult to characterize, but in general, you're absolutely right. That's what that's telling us. The biggest companies responsible for the biggest chunk of production, they're making good strides on this, and seeing some results.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's really important to keep in mind also that, this is one technology in one basin.
Exactly.
Kevin, I'm curious to hear from you. Can we take these results and infer anything about other basins, other parts of the world, or
Yeah.
do we need more data?
I'm I work for a data company, so I'm required to say more data. But I think the point Raul made at the basin level perspective of the flaw of averages it also applies to the rest of the world. Right. The average is not representative, or one play is not representative everywhere. But I would say one of the things we are seeing is, generally speaking, the access or the advent to lower cost observation technology is the deployment of that technology. And where that is occurring in those basins that are, I'd say, what we call of high public interest, I'd expect to see similar behavior. Plus, those companies are active in multiple plays, and that behavior transcends those. The other thing we are seeing, a lot of these companies have made methane abatement health and safety issue. It is operationalized. It is part of business. It's not necessarily driven by regulatory measures anymore. It is just how they operate. And so I expect to see similar things in other plays. But I would also fully anticipate the application, the access technology, and the deployment around the world is going to be very different by regions and the pressures and the realities that they're in each one of those.
Yeah, just
That's
to add to
yeah.
that, Kevin, you're right. It's become sort of normalized, right? That the operational folks care about this stuff.
In certain parts of the world, like
Yes.
I think challenges are very different for different parts of the world.
I think it's not. Two other things that add to that is, of course, new kit, right, is designed with methane in mind. So it naturally tends to be better. And the Permian has so much new kit, right,
Mhm.
that you're seeing improvements there just from a function of new build out. That's certainly not the case in many parts of the world. We're using the same equipment, right, that may be much older.
Well,
I think the last thing that's interesting that I find is people are fusing AI and operational data, right, to move from find and fix to predict and prevent. That's another reason that people are making progress. I feel like they've got a couple years under their belt, right? In 2019 and 2020, we were testing technologies, we were running proof of concept, and then around 21 or 22, we started moving to pick the winners and deploy, right, what's suitable for your assets. That's not happening everywhere in the world by any stretch of the imagination.
yeah, the other language we use when we kind of try to make funny jokes around this is, and this is probably more true of CO2 than CH4. If you're talking about oil and gas, it's best to be young and privileged in the transition, and that joke goes to be you want to be in the youngest play in the best acreage, and that means by all else being equal, you have the highest productivity, so you have the most output to amortize those emissions over, and so that's another way to think about that relationship.
I give you an
Yeah.
interesting data point, Thomas. We did a big study on LNG, and through that we were able to access overflight and satellite data from place. And when we looked at an entire region of the world, I won't say which one it was, but trust me, it's larger than the continental United States. That region had a total of about 7 billion pixels. Okay. The Permian Basin by itself, just in our data set, which is only one county, has 330 billion pixels. So a lot of this is you look and you find and you fix. Okay. Right. But you have to look, right,
Mhm.
to make that progress.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds to me, and I mean, this is a reasonable inference, but if we can say that the drivers of emissions mitigation are the same in the Permian as they are in the rest of the world, then we may be able to infer more confidently that emissions are also going down in the rest of the world. But it really depends on the driver. I think some of them
I
can
think it
be
really does.
global and others are not at all.
The
And
pressure and the
regulations
driver
are pretty
and the
inconsistent.
operators and how much they have made it a part of
Hmm.
their
And the
ethos, right? A part of their goal.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
the Permian being the engine of U.S. unconventionals, it's a particularly charismatic play.
Hmm.
It's in everybody's language. A lot of plays in the rest of the world are not in everybody's vocabulary.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Kevin, I mean, Raul, this is a great analysis. Super useful data. What are you guys thinking about doing next? Obviously, you've probably got something else up your sleeves. Curious to hear what the next steps are.
Yeah, we will repeat. We want to make this kind of data repeatable. We want to make it public. We want this data to be used. We believe that, frankly, companies do want to compete on carbon. There's this concept of a carbon differentiated market, and we hear that from the market. But inconsistencies in approach and account and how these numbers are presented and transparency issues really impair that. So we want to provide this information to give people a picture, to give companies a metric at which they can compare performance against that's out there in the public. And so it's providing context. We also, in terms of being more concrete to your question, we also do CO2. So we're looking at greenhouse gas emission, a very similar release on the Permian coming up. We're looking at other plays similarly. And we're, North America focused, Canada focused, but rest of world as well. There are quality issues that we will encounter as we move to rest of the world in terms of the observation quality. Raul kind of talked about that. And that's the other piece we work on is data quality transparency. We want to be clear when we think we're doing a good job and when we're not doing as good job, but we don't want to impair that information and don't want to impair advancing that conversation.
Yeah, and it's an interesting choice that you have to structurally make, which is, okay, I can put out a consistent benchmark for region X, right? Or play Y or LNG chain Z. I can put that out, but as technology changes, right, you have a choice. Either you stick with the old technology to keep it consistent, okay? Or you change with the technology, right, to get better and better, but it becomes murky as to whether it's comparable to the old one, right? So we've chosen the latter method because we think like we have to stick with technology. So when we get a better number, and our answer to that is also providing this data transparency metric, right? How much can you trust this data? Okay. Because we do feel like everybody's got measurements or everybody has estimates from all across the board. What you really need to know is not just what the estimate is, but also how much you can trust it. Okay. Because without that, you're just trying to randomly compare numbers that could be very, very different from each other.
I do worry that in this conversation, people get obsessed with the number, the methane intensity, the greenhouse gas intensity. And I get that. That's the point. That's why we're interested in it. But Raul's point is very valid too. The first foray into the space is discovery. And when you do discovery, you will often find things and it's not the way you thought. And generally it's worse than you thought. And the companies that invest in doing that shouldn't be punished for doing that because they're actually doing the right thing. And so that data quality piece, the ability to communicate, hey guys, we went out, we spent a ton of money, we got a program in place, we look worse than we thought, but now the numbers are, 800 times more reliable and they're actionable now. I can do something about it. That piece on data quality should be part of the conversation from day one. It shouldn't be something after the fact to explain why something's different. And that is a part of our work too.
Don't shoot the messenger. Kevin, Raul, thank you so much for joining Monday Morning Methane and sharing your fascinating work. Look forward to hearing what how much. Maybe we'll get to 90% next year.
That's right. Maybe
We'll see.
we'll see. We think people will generally meet their targets. There will be some people who absolutely refuse to do something, but
And
hopefully it'll be a small part of production.
There is this whole diminishing returns argument too. Like how much, if it keeps falling, how much do you want to continue to focus on the Permian and maybe we should focus somewhere else?
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thanks so much, you guys. Hope you have a
Thank
great
you.
day and we'll chat soon.
Cheers.